Okay. Well, my name is Alexandra, and I am a ADHD empowerment coach with Clarity Coaching. And I help women and men with ADHD go from stuck to unstoppable.
Mm.
And I'm so delighted to be here today with you and Felicia Desjardins. And we're going to talk about the role of thyroid health and its implications to ADHD, but plus a host of questions around thyroid health and what we can do to create a healthy thyroid to support our thyroid and our hormonal systems. So, welcome, Felicia. If you'd like to come on, we're just going to get you to start by introducing yourself and starting with your personal journey, and then I'll share mine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. And this is a great topic, and I love that you're connecting these two things and bringing awareness to the thyroid issue because I think you'll see quite a few overlaps here. So this should be really good.
Mhm.
My journey. So I am a certified holistic nutritional consultant and a registered bioenergetic practitioner. To sum that up, I will often go by holistic health practitioner because that's a little bit easier for people to understand.
Mhm.
So I got into this at a young age. I felt very called to get into health and wellness, some kind of health care. I didn't know exactly what that looked like, but it was very, very young age in elementary school where I knew that that was kind of the calling that God had placed on my heart and my life. But then at the age of 14, I became really, really ill, and that shifted everything. So I was a really determined, well thought out kid, but maybe a little bit too much so. There were topics and things that I was worried about as a young child that children don't need to be worried about. So there was a lot of stress there. There was a lot of pushing myself. I knew I had goals to go to university and be an athlete and get a scholarship. And so I think those were the pieces that helped contribute to me getting unwell or experiencing those symptoms at 14. And I say that because it's one thing to say I got ill at 14, and that kind of gives that impression of something just magically happened. And as the holistic health practitioner, I want to give that background for people, not only in my own story, but so that you can understand your own story, that there are always contributing factors that contribute to weakening that system or that constitution of a person, and that can open you up to becoming ill. So that's what happened at 14. 2 years later, roughly, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. Again, as a holistic health practitioner, the diagnoses, I take them very lightly because we understand we're working with the whole body and there's usually multiple things happening at once. And so, really, the Lyme disease for me, now that I understand this, was more of an effect that lowering immune system because of the adrenals, because of everything that I was kind of going through, opened up the door for microbes to come in and make me ill. So that's how my journey started. And for the next 8-ish years, maybe a little bit more, me and my parents, especially me and my mom, were really that was our life, was trying to figure out what was happening. And we started, like most people do, in conventional medical system and realized pretty quickly that we were a little bit delusioned there, that we weren't going to get the answers, which was quite a shock because you're raised to think you could go to your doctor and they're going to give you the answer, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we're taught that way. So we hit that wall pretty quick. I did do a number of things in the conventional world. So some testing. I actually was on 2 years of antibiotics, which is really common for Lyme treatment and is just, as you can imagine, really devastating for the gut. So we we did that time. We then started switching over into that more natural side of things, understanding there might be more answers there. And there was to a degree, but I would say a lot of my healing I did do the Rife machine, which was a big part of my healing, and bioenergetics, which is what I do now. So I did those two things, and that really helped. We actually were able to watch the Lyme levels go down through biofeedback testing, which is just so neat. But the really, I guess, turning point for me was focusing on the emotional and the spiritual healing. And that was quite literally God just telling me to stand on his promises, but then also leading me into more of the research on how your thoughts and your emotions affect your physiology. And I started diving into that and understanding, wow, like this, your thoughts and your beliefs are just as powerful as your diet or your supplements or your medications, and we missed that. So I started really going down that road, and that's when I kind of turned a corner and became functional again and started living. So that's what led me into going to school for the nutrition and then the bioenergetics, because that's part of what I had used, and that's why I'm here now, to help people
Mm.
experience healing and freedom. I say through Christ, just like I did, which is why I'm called even you. Even you can get well.
Hmm.
So that's a little bit of it.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Felicia, because so much of that resonates with my own story. The reason I met Felicia through various routes, but I wanted to connect with her because of my own history with hypothyroidism. And was 33 when I was first diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And my doctor proceeded to prescribe me medication that she said I would have to be on for the rest of my life if things didn't change. Um, so it was a lifetime sentence that I said no to. I walked away and said, I'm going to find my own way through this. And so I found a naturopath who helped me re-establish healthy routines, but most importantly, how to nourish my body. And he provided supplements, but more than that, it was food, using various foods that supported my system, as well as using other practices such as hydrotherapy, exercise, of course, being an important part of it, and mindfulness. And so I went back to my doctor. She did a TSH test. And for those of you listening, we're going to be talking about this. But what it does is it determines how well or the thyroid is functioning. And my TSH was normal.
Hmm.
She was shocked. She was like all googly gaga over me because it was like, how did you do that? Like it was some magical thing that I had done. So I just want to share that. But my journey has been long, and I think the thyroid for me has been a symptom of when I'm stressed
Hmm. Yep.
because it'll come up again during stressful times, particularly during transitions, big transitions. Um, or the loss of loved ones. And so I've gone through these transitions, and therefore my thyroid starts acting up. So we're going to talk about this more today with Felicia and how stress is related to the functioning of the whole body. Because this
Mhm.
is not just about the thyroid. When we just talk about the thyroid here, it sounds very Cartesian, doesn't it? It's like it's separate from the rest of the body, but it's not. It's this beautiful harmony of communication that's going on through the entire system that is so intelligent. I mean, this is what I get excited about. I see God in our bodies as the
Yeah.
intelligence that is functioning through us. And it is expressing itself in the outer world, in our outer body, constantly. And when that inner self is dysregulated, then of course the reflection in the outer body is also going to get dysregulated. And I just also want to add about the holistic approach to Felicia that you use that is so important in understanding that we're not just our body and our functions and our adrenals and our thyroid, we're also our emotions and our thoughts, as well as more than that. But that does impact the healthy functioning of our system. So let's dive in. Excited to learn more from you. And my audience is going to benefit from this immensely.
Yeah, well, I'm going to benefit from this conversation too. So,
Great. So like I just want to go into like just the kind of, it's like we're talking here about personal experience, and now we're just going to go to an eagle view of the collective. And um, just a question for you. You work with a lot of clients. And so I'm wondering, you're going to have a very unique perspective on gauging what's happening in our environment in the sense of how it's impacting people's health. And are you noticing some common symptoms or habits like lifestyle habits, diet, any stressors that may be contributing to the thyroid dysfunction?
yeah, I should give context too, because I didn't mention this, but I am a what we call a thyroid success coach. So I actually work for a Dr. Rochelle Vong, who has a thyroid reset system. And so this is where the specialty of thyroid comes in. So just give your audience context there.
Mm.
I'm working with women all over the world with thyroid disease specifically. So when we're looking at thyroid, and I'm glad that you highlighted that, what separates what we do is that yes, we advertise we are this thyroid program, but when you come to work with us, it's the immediate understanding that we're looking at the whole picture. So we're looking at your gut health, we're looking at your adrenals and your stress. So when we're looking at it through that holistic end lens, there's a couple things that I would say that I see, and the kind of the broad way to define this is that we're undernourished, we're overworked, and that we live in this kind of chronic state of self-protection and self-promotion. And I think one of the biggest lies that really holds us back is that there's not enough to go around. A lot of us are stuck in that. There's not enough money, there's not enough food, there's not enough time, there's not enough resources. And it's this resounding narrative that we're kind of pushed into. And I'm kind of starting off by going deep because I think that's the foundation of where we're at. But from that, we also have some other narratives that I see affecting people. And so, two of the big ones is that aging is um, means that you're going to be decrepit. And then there's another one that everything in moderation will keep us healthy. And and then like we talked about too, our only hope is the medical system. So we have these three kind of broad-based narratives that we fall into, but the everything in moderation I find is a big one, and that comes down to our very North American society of again being undernourished and overworked. What I see with a lot of people is that we are eating foods that have no nutrient value, not even just what you'd think of as like the typical junk food. There are majority of people are eating, a good amount of maybe processed, like highly processed foods, but there's also a lot of people who are going through struggles that would say to me, I'm eating pretty clean. And I hear that quite often. And it's mostly true. Um, and so there's two things going on. We still have this thing that we're caught in, that everything in moderation. So, even the sugars and the junk food and the fast food, well, it's okay in moderation. And that seems like such a balanced way of thinking, really. But at the end of the day, our body doesn't think that way. So our mind might agree with that, but our body is not going to react properly to the highly processed junk food, and it's not supposed to. So I see that holding us back, that want to hold on to the comforts. But also for those people who are saying, well, I'm eating fairly clean, we are also somewhat battling that industrial agriculture, and food is no longer has the nutrient value that it once did. And everything in our society, everything we come into contact with on a daily basis, there's so many toxins, there's so many chemicals. And I don't mean that to say that that has to ruin you and that's like a doomsday feel, but it's if we can become aware of that to say, okay, here are all these factors, the nutrient depleted foods, the toxins in my work and daily life, maybe the beliefs that I'm having, and we can start to address those, you can start to lighten the load on your body. And so that's what I really see the overarching picture for people is that as we start to lighten that load and we correct those areas, that's where things start to improve. But in terms of symptoms, I would say chronic fatigue is rampant. Menopause, this horrible transition for women, which is it's not supposed to be. That's also something that we've believed and you see more and more of. And oh, on the opposite end of that, infertility is another thing that we're seeing more and more. And we're speaking about it as again, it's taking on this narrative in the world that it's almost normal or that you should expect that you're probably going to have infertility issues. So we're kind of leaning in that direction and teaching women that. And then, of course, children diagnosed with mental health disorders or ADHD and such. So I'm seeing a lot of those symptoms specifically or disorders.
Thank you. That's amazing. And so much of that resonated for me. Um, and I would just start with this the world we're living in and how that impacts our body and our health. As a young woman or a young person growing up, I did grow up with that kind of self-protective tendency. And it showed up in my journey of healing. My journey involved yoga.
Okay.
And so I was using images, because I was also an artist, we would look at the mind and unpack what was happening in the mind using symbolic language and using pictures. And my life seal, which is my whole life, like my mind, my emotion, like everything was showing up on this life seal through these symbolic representations. And one of them was this huge bird protecting a heart behind. So the bird was placed over the heart. So that was a powerful piece of information, Felicia, was I was able to use that. And I think because of my practice is supporting people build self-awareness, when we build that self-awareness of the tendencies or the ways that we have learned to cope with past trauma and how that is affecting our health.
Yeah. How it's affecting the way that your cells are functioning, the way that your stress response is responding, like the way that your neurotransmitters are working, like even your microbiome. Like there's so much of how we respond and what we believe that has this tangible effect on the physiology, which is just profound, but so
Hmm.
empowering.
Yes, it is empowering, especially when you know,
Yeah.
right? When you find out about yourself more to see the changes that you can actually make. And we're going to talk about that as your holistic approach to working with your clients. So we're just wondering about just talking about the thyroid. It's been my life's journey is trying to understand this little butterfly gland right here and how significant it is. So I wonder if you could just start to talking about the thyroid and what happens. What does underactive or non-functioning thyroid look like? A hyperactive thyroid? I'm just going to let you go.
Yeah.
Just dive in there. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's three kind of sections that we look at, if I can call them that. There's that hypothyroid picture, the hyperthyroid, and then there's the Hashimoto's picture, which is the autoimmune process against the thyroid. But when we're talking about the thyroid, going back to that holistic approach, we're understanding that we're not just talking about the thyroid in isolation and what it does, but in how it relates and connects with the other organ systems. So, just to back that up, we want to look at how the thyroid is even signaled. And so, when we think about the thyroid, we need to also think about the brain and think specifically about the hypothalamus and then the pituitary, because those are going to be the signals. So, your hypothalamus is that CEO. It's that it is constantly examining your environment to see, are we safe? Are we nourished? Is everything balanced here? Is my thermostat regulated? Is my metabolism working right? Do I have enough energy for this? And so, if the hypothalamus senses that we don't have enough energy, it's going to release thyrotropin releasing hormone. And that is going to get sent to the pituitary gland. And then the pituitary gland from there is going to say, okay, we need a little bit more energy. Great. Let's make some TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So, that thyroid stimulating hormone that most people get checked for on the blood work is actually a pituitary signal. So, we're not necessarily measuring something coming out of the thyroid when we're looking at that TSH. And that's important to understand. You're actually checking a pituitary signal hormone. So, that pituitary will release that thyroid stimulant, which does as it sounds. It's going to stimulate the thyroid to say, hey, we need you to make a little bit more hormone here because we need some more energy. So we can really think in the picture of that, the thyroid is kind of the factory. It is that organ that's going to produce that free T4 and free T3. And our free T4 is what we call the inactive, which has to get converted into the free T3. And then that free T3 is what goes out into the cells and does the work or provides the energy. So I want to give that, I want people to be thinking about the thyroid in that sense of it actually starts with the hypothalamus, goes to the pituitary, then goes to the thyroid, and then from there goes out into the body. And I think most people also think about the thyroid as just being more of that metabolism center. Like when people think about it, they often think, oh, yeah, my metabolism is good. I might be losing weight okay if my thyroid is normal. But there are so many other aspects that the thyroid does. Again, it's providing that T3 that's going out into all the cells for energy. So it is supporting neurotransmitter production, that T3. It's supporting neurotransmitter sensitivity, mitochondrial ATP production or energy within the cell, glucose utilization, so intimately connected to blood sugar health, myelin sheath maintenance, so those nerves, synapse formation, neuroplasticity, and then cerebral blood flow. So there's so many things that your thyroid is contributing to. And when we talk about that hypothyroid picture, it's that underfunctioning. So we just don't have enough energy. We're not functioning on the right amount of energy. And then, of course, when we're talking about hyperthyroid, we are overproducing. We're running on like the gas pedal is just pressed down and we're just going. And then Hashimoto's can occur basically with either, but you usually see it with the hypothyroid picture. But that is a little bit different in that we're actually, when we're talking about autoimmunity, we're looking at also what is the immune system doing? Why is that imbalanced? That it's now attacking its own tissue, specifically in this case with Hashimoto's, your thyroid tissue. So those are the three areas that we're kind of looking at.
Mm-hmm. We're just curious, just one question around Hashimoto's is why would the immune system start attacking the thyroid tissue?
So autoimmune is when we think about the immune system, we often think about this like overarching system and it goes up or down, right? Like it's down. We talk about our immune system is down when we're sick or it's up when we're feeling well. And it's kind of it's an oversimplistic way to view it because there is the innate immune system and then there's the adaptive immune system. So innate being what you're born with, and then adaptive being what you acquire over life. And within that adaptive immune system, there are different pathways or what we call polarizations. And so your body is constantly trying to regulate, and it's supposed to be this beautiful orchestra. So some of those polarizations, just to give names to them, is Th1, Th2, Th17, and Treg. Those are just four. four big ones. But again, they're all supposed to be working in harmony. And what can happen is for a number of different reasons, usually it stems to some kind of inflammatory process. But that Th17 pathway can become overregulated. And what happens there is that Th17 becomes overregulated, and then our body starts over presenting things as antigen or as foreign. And
Right.
so it gets just caught in this, like we're just grabbing and presenting to the lymph node, like here's something bad. And so as it gets overactive and ramps up, it can start grabbing its own tissue, bring it to the lymph, and then we can start to misfire and accept it as an antigen or as an invader. So it's a great question because a lot of clients, especially if anybody listening has dealt with thyroid issue or has had Hashimoto's, majority of time you will go into your doctor and they will say, if you ask to retest your antibodies are high. That's going to be there for life. There's nothing you can do about that. There's no use retesting them. And I want to debunk that. It's very dangerous to have that belief because when we are looking at those high antibodies, we're talking about an elevated Th17 pathway. And so there's so much you can do to balance out the immune system again, reduce
Amazing.
that inflammation, and lower that Th17 so that you're not getting that over antigen presentation. You can calm that down. But inflammation in a broad kind of way is often at the root of that.
Amazing, because that is what I did want to talk about in relationship to the similarity of symptoms, the overlapping symptoms of thyroid, low, high, Hashimoto's with ADHD.
Yeah.
And I just, Felicia, the work that you've done is so amazing. And even in terms of prepping for this interview, is Felicia's provided me with all of the symptoms of a hyper Hashimoto's symptomology. And when I look at them, they all look like symptoms of ADHD. So I'm not suggesting that ADHD could be actually thyroid, but it is something that people, and I'm going to hand this over to you, need to address, or the medical system or whoever you're working with needs to address is, and this would be asking for a thyroid test if there is suspicion of ADHD or
Right.
other tests.
Right.
So
So
maybe I'll let you take over here,
I
please.
had broken it down for you in terms of kind of relating to those brain symptoms, especially. So when we
Yeah.
look at hypothyroidism, that lower underactive, then we're seeing reduced dopamine activity. So what does that look like? Poor motivation, apathy, feeling flat, which again, many people are experiencing with different, whether it's ADHD or different mental health issues, even.
Hmm.
Um, and then reduced norepinephrine activity, so brain fog, poor concentration. And then when you get into that hyper, the reverse. So you can get that anxiety, those panic attacks, the feeling on edge, easily startled. You can't,
Yeah.
racing thoughts. That's such that picture.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say you're totally right. We're not suggesting it's this instead, but the again the most common thing that I see, and it's so hard to deal with, just because it's quite frankly sad, is that we're not tested properly, and it's so hard. Again, we have tons of women that come into the program, and I would say it's 98% of them are never have full testing done. Like it's so rare to have someone come into the program who has had a full thyroid panel done. And I'm even talking about there's tons of women that I see who have had their thyroid completely removed and they've never had a full panel. So when we say this is something to look at, like this is something that is not being looked at. And that is where we want to bring awareness of if you're having those symptoms and you're wondering, okay, yeah, it looks like ADHD. Great. Okay, that gives you some insight. But what are the other things that could be contributing, or what are the other deficiencies or disorders that might actually be going on? Like we need to see again the whole picture. So I think we are really falling short in our medical system and just the system in general of looking at again the whole body. Not just going on symptoms and trying to match it to some specific disease, but checking things in general because we should have the option. We should be able to check those things.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
just to say,
Yeah.
check TSH, but also like a T4 and a T3 are very important.
Yeah. Well, the one that I really resonated with was the reduced acetylcholine.
Mm.
And I know that people with ADHD often complain of foggy thinking.
Yeah,
And this is it, like forgetting names, finding difficulty finding words, um, and um, yeah, short-term memory, difficulty learning new information. These can
we
be associated with learning disorders, not just ADHD.
right. We again, women come in all the time, and one of the reasons that I'm so thorough in giving follow-up emails is because the women actually say we need this. Like
Mhm.
they will say in an appointment, "Oh, I'm so glad you're going to send that to me because my brain fog right now, like I'm not retaining all this." So it's one of the top symptoms up there that we see with hypothyroid, especially.
And the other one, when I'm working with my clients, a big one that comes up is difficulty making decisions. And I'm
Yeah.
noticing, and this is another question I have for you, Felicia, is the role of aging in
Mm.
terms of our hormonal health and the shifts in hormones in terms of what we call menopause or menopause in the most, right now, we're calling it disorder,
Yeah.
menopause as a disorder, or even perimenopause. I mean, I think a lot of young people are also seeing the rising symptoms of what they've been diagnosed with ADHD and during perimenopause and especially in menopause women is that they start having all of the symptoms of ADHD and kind of laugh at it, right? Because it's, well, I've got the attention of a squirrel. And it's good to have a sense of humor. But there's also that we also have options to change all of this, to help our bodies function in the most optimal ways. I wonder if you can speak to the menopause, perimenopausal case of women suffering from all of these symptoms and being diagnosed with ADHD later in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of goes back to what we talked about of what are the underlying issues with like Hashimoto's, and we talked about inflammation. But we touched on at the beginning too, how does stress impact things? And I said earlier, we're undernourished and overworked. And when we continue on that cycle of undernourished and overwork, we continue down this, we're constantly raising cortisol, or it's, become um, chronically elevated. Well, now we are producing inflammation, raising a Th2 response potentially in our body, raising estrogen in that, promoting histamine, promoting mast cells. Like there's this choreography of things that happen. And that's what I want to highlight, whether you're dealing with menopause or thyroid or ADHD, it's understanding what is the choreography and where did that stem from and how do we bring that back into balance. So a woman, you know, in her 40s, 50s, wondering about these symptoms, she should be, all of her hormones should be tested. Her thyroid should be tested. I wish we would test brain chemistry and neurotransmitters. But there's so much that we just it's not tested. Um, but those things should be looked at to understand. Okay, what is the whole picture? What is the whole body doing? Where is it stemming from? Because it might be stemming from gut inflammation that's now affected and led to brain inflammation, which is throwing your hormones off. Like it might not start with your hormones. It
Mm.
might start with that brain chemistry or that gut inflammation. And vice versa, maybe it is starting with hormones, which is affecting gut, and so we have to kind of understand it in that context. And that, I think, for some people can feel overwhelming because it's easier to look at a system that separates everything, right? Like it's easy for us to think, I have a hormone problem. Okay, I can just focus on hormones. I have a brain problem. I can just focus on brain. But it's really falling into a trap because again, that's not how the body is working. We have to understand it in the context of how the body is functioning. So for those women, it again looking at that whole picture to understand where is it stemming from.
Mhm. Okay. So I'm also curious here about so we're just going to go to another level. We've been talking about the physical, but I'm wondering if you have any insights of the mental emotional impact uh, on the thyroid of what we're seeing in the world. So let me get more specific here. Let's look at women. And because low thyroid is predominantly found in women, is that true?
Yeah, it is.
And so my question is what, apart from the physical, is occurring for women at the mental emotional level that is impacting the thyroid?
Yeah, I might have different takes on this, but I mean, again, to say that we're overworked, is going to tie into this.
Okay. Yeah.
But there's so much pressure on the woman today to be the independent, strong woman who does everything. And this, again, this is something that we see in a lot of clients, and these are the clients that we often have the most struggle with if we can't tap into that, if they're not willing to address that. That's where we can sometimes hit walls because that drive to do everything and be the be all role in their family, in their work life, in their personal life in general. It's just running women dry. But there is this pressure of I have to be the mom that does everything. I have to take care of the home. I need to prove myself and also be able to be thriving in my career. I have, juggling all. I have to be fit. I have to look after my nutrition. Like
My
it's
God. Just listening to that is overwhelming.
this, it sounds cliche to say we'd like to go back to a simpler time, but really our physiology wasn't designed to handle all of that. Our physiology was designed for that simpler time. And I think that pressure, even in my own journey, like as soon as I start putting too much, because I could definitely fall into the category of being one of those women sometimes. And as soon as I start placing all that pressure on myself, I can feel my body start to shut down.
Wow.
And that that's normal in a sense because that is that hypothalamus responding to what it's perceiving as like this isn't attainable or sustainable.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's a normal thing, but we have to catch that and be willing to look at that and go, when I can catch that and then release the pressure, I can feel my body just come back to life. And
Amazing.
and so learning that, I think, for the woman today, and this goes back to that self protection and self promotion. And I'm going to attribute all of that to faith and especially to my faith of knowing that I don't have to do life all out of my own power and strength. When I know that I can turn to a God who loves me and made me for a purpose and made my body for a purpose. He made my body to know what it's doing. Like my body doesn't forget randomly how to heal. It doesn't just break usually. That's usually not the case when we're looking at people. So having that to fall back on and to sustain us takes that pressure off of I have to be it all, which I think is hurting a lot of women today.
Wow. Okay. That's powerful. So I just want to share my own experience here because my path through healing has been through the spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're talking about is a spiritual level of building that inner sense of trust, inner sense of knowing that we are here for a purpose and that there's a higher power, a God however you look at it in your life, that is there, that is supporting you, and you don't have to do this all by yourself. Because I was a firstborn in my family,
Yeah.
a
There's,
firstborn girl.
yeah.
And so as a firstborner, we kind of took on all the responsibilities, not only of the family, but eventually of the world. And so I really resonate with that the importance of spiritual healing in this. And that's my thesis, is that true healing really doesn't fully happen until all of these parts of our lives are healed: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual.
Right.
And
Well,
that's wholeness.
yeah, if we're really looking at the body and understand, like if we're truly seeing ourselves as a mind, body, and spirit, that physical piece is just this one small. If all of our efforts, and this was actually somebody had said that to me in my healing journey. She had looked at me and gone, "You've knocked on the physiology, the physical door for 8 years. What about the spiritual and emotional?" And that's what, like, I had a great spiritual life in my mind, but I wasn't connecting all of those three and really approaching my physical health through also the spiritual and emotional, understanding that if I worked on these, this would come into alignment. So we missed that, and it's hard because we're not taught that in society.
Mhm. There's one other point I'd like to raise here, and that is the placement of the thyroid gland, because it's right here. So it's an incredible symbolic, its symbolic presence is the throat or the voice. And so I'm wondering if there's a relationship here for women of not, of somehow censoring themselves, being censored by the society, the culture. What is shutting down our self-expression?
Mm, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I was thinking in terms of the spiritual and working with, certain women are open to different things. So you can go a little bit deeper with people. So I was thinking specifically of someone that often what I'll do if I'm able to get a little bit deeper with someone is I ask that question of what's the big um, worry or fear or burden that you're carrying around. And when you connect that to the throat, sometimes you think I'm holding that, I'm keeping that in, like I'm not going to express that. We often don't want to express our fears and our worries and our traumas. Like we keep those in, we don't express them. So, but there's a profound thing that happens with anybody that goes through that process, that as you speak it out, there is this freedom of getting it out. And we don't necessarily just stop there, like that's step one, but that is step one. So in context of what you're saying, step one of that spiritual release is expressing what are the traumas, what are the fears, what are the worries, what are the burdens that you're carrying, and let's get them out, let's do something with those. So that
Yeah.
heavily connected to women.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would also add that the suppression of the trauma is actually the suppression of the very difficult emotions.
Yeah.
And for women, the big one that is so difficult to express is anger. And
Yeah.
so it's a shutting down of, the need to express anger in a healthy way. And then there's also the fear of expressing not just rage from trauma, from being traumatized as a young person, if that's the case. There's the tears and the grief that is associated with that. That is so hard. I think a lot of women hold it down because of the fear that it's just going to be too much and it will overtake them.
Yeah. Or because of what they've been taught. And not in a bad way that it's all on your parents or it's all on your spouse or whatever it is, but that's something to work with. Even I'm thinking about even me and my husband as we've gone through things, and my husband, as I would, because I've learned to express the worries, express the fears, and that first bit of expressing it can often sound a little bit negative. Like, why are you holding, or why are you talking about that? And he would often act like kind of be thrown back at that, like, well, isn't that kind of bad that you're like, you don't want to focus on those? And so, I had to recognize that that's not him trying to be repressive. It's just him not understanding what it is to express, like most of society.
Right.
Yeah, so understanding that with different people, and when you come into those relationships with people, and when you can feel truly safe, or if you're not feeling truly safe, and how that also suppresses. And it again, with him, it's not he was doing anything wrong. We just had to talk through that, and we had to like he had to learn that with me. And now it's become this beautiful thing that we express those things together.
That's
Well,
beautiful.
yeah, it is. It can be really beautiful, but we have to do
And
some work.
not have to do a lot of, I think we have to do some work. Yeah. So that's a really good point too, just as we start to close is, just thinking about the listeners, I want to share the practice, just starting at the mental emotional level that you shared with me, because I am working with Felicia right now. The practice of identifying and speaking the emotion, and then the next steps. If you could share that with the audience, I think that would be really empowering for them to start to take control of their emotional, mental, spiritual health.
Well, I love that we can talk about this because this is truly the foundation of where I started. My mom's mom died when she was very young, and my mom actually came to her faith in Christ through an older woman, Joan, and that woman became my grandmother. Grandma Joan is what we call her, what I call her, and she actually is the one that taught me this at a young age. But it was that spiritual practice, and it comes from Second Corinthians of take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ,
Wow.
which is so cool to
Mhm.
think about, like her as a like she's my grandmother, she's older, right? Like she's doing this way back when, teaching people that your thoughts and what you think are impacting your life in every way, and they can bind you up, they can hold you back, they can keep you stuck in fear. So, what she would walk us through, and what I love to walk people through when I can, is that first step of expressing. Okay, let's be honest. Let's confess. What is confession? It's just confessing what's there, what's on there. What do I believe about myself, others, and God? Right? What are those thoughts? And what are in that? What are the burdens? What are the heavy weights? What are maybe the lies that I'm carrying around about myself, others, or God? So to express them. And I often get people to, and this actually comes from also a man named Jamie Winship. He walks people through this as well. And I'm going to use a little bit of how he does it too in having someone or yourself. I do this all the time. Go to that safe place in your mind and imagine God or unconditional love there with you. It's not you, it's a separate, but imagine them there with you and taking note of what are they doing? What do you see? Where are you? What's your safe place? And then you can actually physically write out what are the lies? What are the fears? What are the things that I'm believing or the things that I'm afraid to express? What are those heavy things? Write them down. And in your mind, you can hand those to the to God or to unconditional love and watch and see what he does with that. It'll be different. Everybody will be different. But
Mm.
what does he do with that? And then the next step of that, so you've gotten that out. The next step, especially in our faith, is we're recognizing this, that I'm not enough. I'll never add up. I couldn't possibly, be able to do this, or I'm not beautiful. We're recognizing those as lies. Those are not truth that your creator speaks over you. And they're not truths that he wants you to hold. So in that next step of just repentance. And what is repentance? It's turning 180 and going a new way.
Mm.
And so it's, oh, forgive me for holding that. I release it to you and surrendering that. But then the final piece is so important because it's that turning the other way. And in order to turn the other way and walk a new way, we actually have to have a truth instilled over that lie. So if it's I'm not enough, okay, God, unconditional love, what's the truth you want to replace that with? Um, you're more than enough in Christ. You are perfectly and wonderfully made, whatever it is.
Mm.
But to have that truth, write that new truth down, and that is your ability to walk the other way and to
Yeah.
go forward in freedom.
Beautiful.
So that's the process that is
Mm.
when we talk about really experiencing healing and freedom, body, mind, and spirit. I really believe it starts there for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody is experiencing a set of circumstances, just as we've talked about at the mental emotional level, so under a lot of stress, experiencing memories of past trauma, and it's starting to impact the body. What symptoms would you tell my audience to watch for and
Mm.
steps that they can take? So just keeping it very simple. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, this is hard because it is so different for everybody. We
yeah,
can see the same, I guess, physiological or even chemical, like hormonal pattern in people, but it might express differently. So, some people might express more of achy joints uh, when they're dealing with inflammation. But I would say, like, if we're talking about, okay, we've really suppressed things for a long time. Now we're experiencing the physical repercussions of that. Usually, I think it's going to come out in that suppression of the body, which is to me, I'm going to think about those hypo states, the hypothyroid, the lack of energy, the lack of motility in our gut, the lack of thinking capacity. Everything just starts to be suppressed because we are suppressing. So I think that's how it kind of comes out in the physical more often than not.
okay. And then I think the next thing would be that if you are working with a medical practitioner, is to make certain requests for your blood analysis.
Yeah,
What would those be the most important things to start
yeah.
assessing?
Yeah, it's hard, and this is different everywhere. Like I said, we have clients from the UK, Australia, all over the world, so it's a little bit different. But in Canada, especially, certain things are very difficult. But on a broad kind of starting point, when we're looking at the thyroid, most of the time when you go in and ask for thyroid to be tested, they are just going to test a TSH. That is the standard that they are taught to do. So, when we're talking about the medical system, I don't want to sound like they are always the bad guys. I'm thinking it's actually the way that the system is set up. There's so much pressure placed on them, and they're looked at to be the be all end all. That's who we should go to for everything, and
Mhm.
that's where we go wrong. But so in context, again, in what they are taught to just do the TSH. And we need to go farther in a holistic approach. We need to see a TSH, we need to see a free T4 and a free T3. So, to give context to why, some people can have a little bit of a higher TSH, but their T4 is normal and then their T3 is really low. Well, that's someone who's a different picture. They have a little bit of hypothyroid going on, but they also have a conversion issue. And that gives us more context to, okay, what's happening in the kidneys, in the liver, in the brain, where conversion is actually happening. Why is that process not happening? So
Mhm.
if we're truly taking a look at the thyroid itself and its function, we need to see the free T4 and free T3. And then depending on I mean, we like to test everybody for antibodies. So if you've been having thyroid symptoms and thyroid issues, it's prudent to get those antibodies tested because then we know, are we dealing with an autoimmune issue, which is, okay, we have to also address your immune system in a specific way, or are we just dealing with that signaling, that thyroid issue?
Mhm.
So anti thyroid globulin and anti TPO. So anti TG and anti TPO are the two
Okay.
ways to look for.
Thank you. That's very helpful, I'm sure, for those listening, to really start taking responsibility for our own health and not, I mean, it is so easy for us to hand over our inner authority, our personal authority to an outside force. And these are little steps that we can start taking to start to take responsibility, getting informed, getting educated, and listening to our bodies, starting with that by building that self-awareness piece, because a lot of people may not even, they may live a year or two with these symptoms and think, it's just part of aging,
Yeah, right.
right?
I want to say to that too that for the audience, you can set the tone. I think often we go into the doctor's office with a bit of fear of like they know what's best and I can't say anything. And really, when you walk into my office, it's we're working together. Like, and that's the way that it should be across all whatever medicine you're practicing or whatever holistic health or health wellness thing you're practicing in general. It's we're working together because you know your body as well, and you
Yeah.
should be empowered to have a say in that. So I would say too, when you're going in, for my clients, as you know, I give everybody a list of blood work I'd like to see done, and I give it with a letter, and I get you to bring that to your doctor. But going into that appointment with setting the tone of, hey, I want to work with you. I have things to say. I'd like to be heard. And I know you have things to say, and I want to hear you. But there should be this level of we get to work together. And if there's not, even going as far to ask that person, it really seems like you're not willing to work with me. You're not respecting what I am saying and what I am feeling. Can you
Mm.
explain why you're taking that stance? I getting that, in a respectful way, but doing that in a respectful way, I think having those conversations can kind of bring us all back into, oh yeah, this person does have a say on their body. And
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
encourage people to do that as well.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's very helpful. Because I think we like listening to you say that it's I have done it, but I haven't done it recently. And it's something that is so easy to forget, but also it's something we have to think about. It's something where we have to take a stand for ourselves.
Be
And
uncomfortable.
that's not usually a problem for me. But if for some reason, when I go into a doctor's office, something happens and I kind of go into a stress response and the
Yeah,
prefrontal cortex shuts down.
not alone. There's a lot
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. So,
I
but
agree.
this has been so helpful, Felicia. Now, I think a lot of people listening to this, would love to know how to contact you. If you can share where they can reach out.
So my company or what I go by is Even You. So again, that Even You Can Get Well speaks to just my journey. So you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, Even You Can Get Well, or I think on Instagram it's Even You Holistic Clinic. Either
Okay.
way, if you type in Even You or my name, you'll see me on those platforms. Those are the platforms that I'm mainly using right now. And it's not hard to find my email, which is evenyouholisticclinic@gmail.com. So people can email me there. And then my phone number to contact me is also on those platforms as well. So not too hard to get a hold of me. But
Okay. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. And also, for people who want to work at that another level of the a more yogic approach where we're learning to build self-awareness and listen to ourselves. Because as you said, Felicia, we're asking a doctor to listen to us, but if we're not listening to ourselves, then that's where it first starts, is with ourselves. So you could reach out
thank
to
you for this
me.
conversation because
Yeah, this has been amazing.
this has been fantastic. And I'm excited for your listeners to hear that information and
I
hopefully be
am.
empowered in that too.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Alicia and Felicia, sorry. And we'll be coming back to you with another interview with a big surprise. So stay tuned for this podcast and have a beautiful day. Namaste.